Wrong. The story at 11.
When we remember a time, we remember moments. A kaleidoscope of the sights, the sounds, the emotions that remind us of the way we were. Our world. It's about time. Here are Linda Ellerby and Ray Gandolf.
For the next hour, think of your television set as a radio and a time machine.
Tonight, our memories are stored in an old attic in an old house with squeaky boards and scary noises.
Welcome to our world. It is autumn of 1938. Most especially welcome to a certain hour on a certain night, 48 years ago, this night, this hour. October 30th, 8 o'clock on the evening before Halloween, 1938. That's when radio came of age, and an extraordinary number of citizens of seeming good sense believed we were under attack from Mars, and it scared the daylights out of them.
We will deal at some length tonight with Orson Welles and his Halloween radio show that set this country on its ear. But to try to figure out why so many presumably sensible people believed there were Martians in their front yard, we're first going to build a context for that Martian hoax. In the fall of 1938, we were self-absorbed and naive. The world was not a global village, but it was shrinking. And we heard on the radio that a madman was terrifying Europe, and we were afraid. We were willing to fight this guy if we had to, but we sure didn't want to. Evil frightened us, but it also fascinated us, even entertained us.
Who knows what evil lurks in the hearts of men?
Radio gave us The Shadow.
The Shadow knows.
In the cottage of the seven dwarfs dwells Snow White.
Walt Disney's Snow White was one of the scariest movies ever made.
Snow White still lives, the fairest in the land. Is the heart of a pig you hold in your hand.
Jeepers Creepers.
Even the most popular song had a creepy title.
Jeepers Creepers. Where'd you get those eyes?
On the fun side, a Halloween beauty contest in California.
How'd they get so lit up?
Cider time in Maine.
How'd they get that size? Golly gee, when you turn those heaters on, woe is me. Got to put my cheaters on. Jeepers Creepers.
Kids all over the country getting ready to go trick-or-treating, ready to put on scary masks.
Where'd you get those eyes?
In England, the masks were real and scarier. Britain was afraid. The things that threatened to go bump in the night could be bombs, not ghosts. Everybody got a gas mask. Trenches were dug in Hyde Park. Germany had annexed Austria that March. Now Adolf Hitler was looking at Czechoslovakia like a hungry dog. He wanted to oblige the German-speaking people in the western third of Czechoslovakia, the Sudetenland, many of whom wanted to be German. Should he invade, France and Britain were expected to help Czechoslovakia stop him.
We are pledged to work for peace.
In mid-September, Britain's Prime Minister Neville Chamberlain flew to Germany. After 2 meetings with Hitler, war seemed likely. Chamberlain's parliamentary secretary was Lord Alec Douglas Hume.
It was quite a dramatic affair. I mean, Chamberlain had not been in an airplane ever. I mean, people didn't fly much. So it caught people's imagination. This rather lonely, quiet, unspectacular man doing something which was spectacular. Therefore, people didn't have very much excuse for failing to face up to the seriousness of the situation.
We must keep ourselves adequately strong in national defense. A navy second to none. Preparedness on the land.
In America, the war threat was more remote. Yet newsreels had a patriotic ring. President Franklin D. Roosevelt had asked for and gotten, with some difficulty, appropriations to beef up defense. Roosevelt talked the country through the war threat as he had through the Depression, by using the radio. And he was its master.
In troubled days, when the nerves of men and women have been strained almost to the breaking point,
he had this ringing voice. It got through to the cheapest radio in the world.
Radio listeners knew that voice, too. He played the Shadow and a dozen other roles. He later worked for Roosevelt as a campaigner and speechwriter. Orson Welles.
Roosevelt Fireside Chat was a great American institution. When he spoke on the radio, everybody in the world listened to him. And he was galvanizing.
No people in all the world can be kept eternally ignorant or eternally enslaved.
After one of his speeches, we all applauded. He sat down and had a bit of his favorite cocktail, and he said, well, you know, Orson and I are the two greatest actors in the world. He says, only Orson's job is to stir the people up, and mine is to pour oil on the troubled waters.
In mid-afternoon, this tropical terror swept over outer Long Island, struck with wind almost 200 miles an hour. Tidal waves 30 to 40 feet high.
September 21st, Long Island and New England are hit by a devastating hurricane. Primitive national weather reporting is unable to give any warning. Close to 700 lives are lost and an estimated $400 million worth of property destroyed. 95% of it is uninsured.
Men risked almost certain death trying to swim to their isolated homes, and the Coast Guard restrained them when it could.
Charles Whipple, a reporter for the Boston Globe, is assigned to the surprise storm.
Like nothing that I'd ever seen before. The wind was so strong, it made my little car sway as it went along like a sailboat at sea. Great damage, both to homes and boats. One thing the hurricane did do was give people a scare.
It was a sensational story, and a lot of people wanted to hear about the hurricane, but a lot more people wanted to hear about Europe, even though the hurricane was going on at the same time.
That voice delivered much of the news on radio, Robert Trout. It was a hectic season.
This is Bob Trout bringing you the news of Europe.
It got to the point where we were on the air almost all the time, and there was very little else on the air except us.
And now we come to the thrilling final episode of our radio drama.
News may have dominated in the fall of 1938, but radio was still primarily an entertainment medium, and the nation's primary entertainment.
Ring up the boys, May, tell them to meet me at Pine Creek Forks.
There were westerns and soap operas and adventures of all sorts.
Tell the boys to ride.
See you later, Ma.
Everything from the Lone Ranger to Jack Armstrong. But most of all, there was music. It was the era of the big bands, Benny Goodman, the Dorseys, Bunny Berrigan, Count Basie, Duke Ellington. And if you couldn't get to Broadway to see them, you could hear them on the radio. It was also a time when comedy was king. Jack Benny, George Burns, Gracie Allen. The most listened to show on radio was with Edgar Bergen and Charlie McCarthy. McCarthy was the wooden doll.
A haunting we will go.
Hey, Charlie, the word is hunting.
Well, not on Halloween, it ain't.
It's tough being up against the highest rated show. That fall, the task fell to the Mercury Theater on the Air, produced by Orson Welles and John Houseman.
We were the competitors to Charlie McCarthy and the Chase and Sanborn show. So that our rating was about 3.2 and their rating was about 38.9. Nevertheless, we panicked the nation. They didn't.
The nation was ready for that fictional panic because the headlines were full of real crisis. Chamberlain's attempts notwithstanding, as September drew to a close, Hitler was unappeased.
Well, there we were, afraid of a war that we expected was going to happen and didn't want to get involved in. Nature had reminded us that a lifetime of loving and saving and building can go just like that in an hour. Small wonder, maybe, that so many of us panicked when Orson Welles told us on Halloween Eve that Martians were in New Jersey. Come back to the fall of 1938, to the texture of that time, and some of the heroes of that season.
Our World, brought to you by new Metaprin. When your body's aching, when your body's hurting, when your body hasn't got time for the pain, Metaprin.
Introducing Metaprin. When your body hasn't got time for the pain.
I haven't got time for the pain. I haven't got room for the pain. No, I haven't got time for the pain anymore.
Metaprin has ibuprofen, once only in prescription strength. It relieves body pain, even minor arthritis pain fast. And it's safer to your stomach than aspirin.
I haven't got time for the pain.
When your body hasn't got time for the pain. New Metaprin from the makers of Tylenol products.
Chances are that everyone in the average family has problems finding the twist ties. So why bother? Glad handle tie bags have built-in stress flex handles that are easy to tie, handles that are easy to lift, handles that are easy to carry to the curb with no twist ties. Glad handle tie bags. Why take chances? Get Glad.
Stop squirming. This'll take care of your sore throat. Trust me.
Tastes great. Sucrete spray? But sprays don't last long enough.
Maximum strength Sucrete spray does.
Compare Sucretes to the other leading brand. Only Sucretes has diclonine for longer-lasting temporary relief of minor sore throat pain. Sucrete spray lasts twice as long.
Trust me?
I still feel great. Maximum strength Sucrete spray lasts twice as long.
Create your own platter at Red Lobster.
Choose any two. Oh, the pride of creation.
It's me.
Choose any two. Your own combination.
I brought them together.
I choose any two of 11. Fried shrimp, yeah. Shrimp scampi. Flounder, with scallops, that's it.
Choose any two. Create a seafood sensation.
Shrimp and shrimp. Big idea.
Create your own platter. Only at Red Lobster.
Greta Weitz, 7-time winner, goes for an unprecedented 5th victory in a row. Orlando Pizzolato, he's won the last 2 years, is a third attainable. The race in a class by itself, the New York City Marathon, live Sunday morning on ABC Sports.
Welcome back to the fall of 1938, when your milk was delivered in a bottle, probably unhomogenized, with a collar of cream on it for about 13 cents a quart. Round steak at the meat market was 35 cents a pound. And for 75 cents, you could get a nice prime rib at the London Chop House in Detroit. Before you go all teary with nostalgia, though, note that the average working stiff made about $25 a week. We were still working our way out of a depression and hoping it wouldn't take a war to cure it.
If, as my high school history teacher, Mrs. Wisdom, used to tell me, all wars are fought for trade, then it's worth noting that in 1938, in the autumn, Germany had a trade deficit of 432 million marks, roughly 177 million in 1938 dollars. The country had been bankrupt for 7 years. Here in America, depression was part of the vocabulary still, and of 130 million Americans, nearly 10 million were out of work still. No wonder that the top box office movie that year was a fantasy about 7 little men and a princess and a witch, all from Disney.
A big hit in Germany that fall was Leni Riefenstahl's movie Olympia, a stylized documentary of the 1936 Olympics that glorified the graceful, blonde, Aryan Superman. One man was at least as super as those Aryan guys.
Look, up in the sky. It's a bird. It's a plane. It's Superman.
He sprung from the minds of Joe Shuster and Jerry Siegel.
The newspapers, the radio were full of the bad news of the things that were going on in Europe. And the world definitely needed somebody who could step in and do something about it. Hopefully it could happen in real life, but if it didn't, and it looked like maybe it wouldn't, perhaps a fictional character could do something about these terrible things. He is a figure of wish fulfillment. All of us wish we could handle all of our everyday problems as easily as he did.
Siegel says that mild-mannered Clark Kent was patterned after Harold Lloyd, the silent movie klutz. Superman was inspired by the movie heroics of Douglas Fairbanks Sr. We seemed hungry for heroes that anxious autumn. The Lone Ranger made his movie debut, and Lou Gehrig played himself, neither wisely nor too well, in a Western.
Hey, Lou, put your brand on that, will you? I sure will. On the level, Lou, where are you going?
My sister and I bought a swell ranch in a peaceful valley.
Gehrig seemed more comfortable that fall, helping the Yankees beat the Cubs 4 straight in the World Series. Don Budge won the Grand Slam of tennis, displaying a talented backhand. Miss Ohio became Miss America, no talent necessary.
Shakespeare could have had Miss America in mind when he said, "Age cannot wither her, nor custom stale her infinite variety."
Golfer Sam Snead won $5,000 on September 27th, a record $17,000 for the year.
Hey, that's my ball. Just a minute. I beg your pardon. Oh, dear.
You shouldn't do that, you know.
But what shouldn't I do?
Talk while someone's shooting.
Yes, but
Well, anyway, I
boy.
forgive you because I got a good shot.
Some movie stars oozed sophistication.
Oh, are you playing through?
No, I've just driven off the first tee and
I see you're a stranger here. You should be over there. This
Cary Grant and Katharine Hepburn in Bringing Up Baby. Pixelated playboys and madcap heiresses, we loved them and envied them. Got a problem? Pretend it isn't there.
There, you see, it's a circle.
Well, now, of course it is. You think it would roll if it was square?
No, I have reference to a mark on the ball.
I
That
know,
proves
I was
it's a
only
crow
being
flight.
silly.
That's
Well,
my ball.
what does it matter? It's only a game anyway.
The theater offered plenty of comedies, musicals, Hell's a Poppin', Knickerbocker Holiday, big productions, flashy sets. But the most important play on Broadway that fall was played on a bare stage, Thornton Wilder's Our Town. It won the Pulitzer Prize and went on to become the most performed American play ever written. It captured the essence of small-town life in America, at a time when events were threatening to shatter that isolation and that innocence. It was at the same time homespun and experimental, and it baffled many of its first audiences. The first production included actor William Rorick. He remembers an early review.
The notice said, "When we arrived, the curtain was up and there was no set on the stage. We wondered if there was going to be a play. After sitting for 2 hours, we still wonder. Period. End of review."
Richard Barr saw the very first performance.
People were walking out of it. They'd never seen anything like it. That bare stage with those signs and people climbing ladders. I mean, it was ridiculous.
Our town's bare stage demanded the same audience imagination as did radio.
Instead of your imagination being limited by a set, however beautiful, you thought of your own village, your own churchyard, your own hills, your own bank, your own railroad station.
The peace of all the our towns, in fact, the peace of our world, is, that autumn, about to disappear. As we moved towards Halloween, everything seemed more frightening.
Come back to the fall of 1938, to a world speeding toward war and the shame of Munich.
Our World continues in a moment.
Why go to some fast food place that serves dried out chicken when you can go to Kentucky Fried Chicken? They always have fresh, juicy chicken.
Kentucky Fried Chicken, we do chicken right.
My triplets might look the same, but they've got 3 very different colds. Cindy's coughing, Carrie's all stuffy, and poor Chrissy has coughing, sneezing, and a stuffy head.
Different kids can get different colds. That's why there's Pediacare with 3 different formulas. For coughs, there's Pediacare 1. For a stuffy, runny nose, 2. For colds with all those symptoms, 3.
Pediacare worked on all their colds.
Pediacare, because different kids get different colds.
I just lost it. Hey, Chief, we need an 800 number.
We need more lines.
I think we need help.
I think we need a fax machine. I've been waiting for
Computers, new phones. I think we need help.
Today, what a growing business needs most is finding out what it needs most. From long distance to phone systems to telemarketing, AT&T has the answers.
No, but we need good stuff.
I think we need help.
Call our small business specialists. We can help.
In 1 minute, Americans use 23,099 microwaves. And in about 1 minute, all of them can microwave Cheese Whiz for instant hot cheese sauce. Cheese Whiz processed cheese spread. The marvelous microwave in a minute cheese sauce.
The Volvo 760, the car for people whose means have changed, but whose values haven't.
In a moment, Our World continues, recalling the way we were. Come back to Halloween, 1938.
Friday, 2 Halloween specials. First, Webster goes witch hunting and scares himself silly.
He must be home before the sun comes out.
Then it's trick or treat for Mr. Belvedere.
What am I going to go as? Why aren't you going naked? Then everybody will think you're Miss Piggy.
It's a devil of a night.
Hold it. Hold it.
For Mr. Belvedere and Webster.
Tomorrow.
Tonight at 11 on Eyewitness News, it was tragic. The helicopter crash that claimed the life of a radio reporter. What went wrong? The startling new revelations tonight. Plus, Austrian President Kurt Waldheim comes clean. He finally admits being involved in the Nazi operation that led to the massacre of thousands in Yugoslavia. And there's a Russian connection. Also, the drug AZT is being hailed as the best available for the treatment of AIDS. Should more people be eligible for treatment? The controversy tonight at 11 on Eyewitness News.
You
You are about to come face to face with something extraordinary. American Airlines Fall Super Savers. Incredibly low fares to over 90 cities in the continental United States. Discounts up to 75% and prices as low as $39 to $159. American Airlines Fall Super Savers. Call today because space is going fast.
We're American Airlines, something special in the air.
Go trick-or-treating with the Hollywood Square tomorrow at 7:30.
Welcome back to the autumn of 1938. The subject of this week is World War and the War of the Worlds. A giant Halloween hoax is about to be front page news, but for the moment, the front page is occupied with plain old bad news. This set is modeled after a 1938 New York City newsstand, and if it's September, the news is about the probability of war in Europe and whether America will be able to keep from joining that war. The fear will feed the fear, and it will happen not through the traditional methods of this newsstand, but over and around the new national campfire, radio.
There's nothing inherently frightening about two crooked S's lying one atop the other. But the swastika meant Germany, which meant Hitler, which meant evil. And when I see a swastika today, my heart still goes bump. Look at these war cards that kids got with their bubble gum. An artist's rendering of a concentration camp warns on the back, "Don't let it happen over here." Wow, scary stuff. In September 1938, Britain was on the very edge of war. The Archbishop of Canterbury prayed for peace.
There were plenty of prayers for peace in Britain that last week of September. By September 28th, Chamberlain's request for a third and expanded meeting with Hitler had been unanswered. And on that day, Chamberlain addressed the House of Commons.
He was on the verge of a pretty clear indication to the House of Commons that war was imminent. Chamberlain began his speech with no knowledge that Hitler had agreed to a new meeting.
During Chamberlain's speech, word came that Hitler had invited Britain, France, and Italy to a conference at Munich, set for the next day, September 29th. The information was first passed to Lord Hume.
But I couldn't get it to Chamberlain because he was speaking, standing up at the dispatch box. So I gave it to Sir John Simon, who was Chancellor of the Exchequer, who took a long time to understand what it meant. He was a very clever man, but it took him by surprise. And I thought he wasn't going to hand it to Chamberlain in time. Anyhow, he handed it over, and there it was. And Chamberlain made the announcement, and the whole House of Commons rose in acclaim.
September 29th, Chamberlain, France's Premier Daladier, Italy's Mussolini, and Hitler met at Munich. They were deciding the fate of the Sudetenland, the 10,000 square miles of Czechoslovakia on the German border. No representative of Czechoslovakia was there. No representative of the Soviet Union was there. Four powers deciding the new shape of Europe.
That same day, the movie You Can't Take It With You was released nationally. It would win an Oscar for Best Picture. Lionel Barrymore could have won an Oscar for Prophecy.
Lincoln said, "With malice toward none, with charity to all." Nowadays, they say, "Think the way I do, or I'll bomb the daylights out of you."
We're living in a crazy, mixed-up world, aren't we? Everybody grumbling and growling and at each other's throats.
If Clark Gable said it was a crazy, mixed-up world, it must be true. He could do anything. Even 16-year-old Judy Garland from another movie sang him a love song.
I'm just another fan of yours, and I thought I'd write and tell you so. You made me love you. I didn't want to do it. I didn't want to do it.
At breakneck speed in Too Hot to Handle, Gable solved all his problems in an hour and a half. The real world was hurtling along too, events moving faster and faster, harder to control.
Very mention of your name sends my heart reeling. You know you made me love you.
aviation sets the pace in 1938. Our world becomes suddenly smaller as Howard Hughes circles the globe in less than 91 hours.
Speed was an end in itself. It was getting scary.
A tisket, a tasket, a brown and yellow basket.
In October, the land's speed record was broken twice in 2 days.
Service that is tops and gas that's extra fine. There's a smile for every mile at the S.O. sign. E-S-S-O makes your car go. Happy motoring.
You could feed your new LaSalle or your Buick for 10 cents a gallon. For nothing, on the car radio, you got war scares.
Has definitely rejected the Hitler memorandum. The story was radio's big event, the biggest thing on radio, the longest running thing on radio. People seem to be listening almost around the clock. And it was well established that radio was a medium to be reckoned with, and certainly the fastest news medium in the world.
We learned instantly from radio that Hitler would be awarded the Sudetenland in return for his promise to take no more. Appeasement. But Hitler didn't act appeased.
Mussolini did most to persuade Hitler that he ought to give more time and take things more slowly. And Hitler was disgruntled. The next morning when we went to see him after the agreement, I thought he was one of the crudest, rudest human specimens I'd ever seen. Nasty, thoroughly nasty bit of work. And in a very bad temper, because he'd hoped by then to be in Czechoslovakia.
Chamberlain, apprehensive about being labeled an appeaser, persuaded Hitler to sign a promise that Germany and Britain would not go to war.
Hitler signed it. Rather suspiciously quickly, I thought, but he did sign it. And Chamberlain thereupon made up his mind to give that the maximum publicity when he got home.
And the Prime Minister comes home. Home to an empire filled with joy and relief. Home to a welcome that he will never forget.
When he got back, he waved it around and said, "This is what Hitler signed."
Some of you perhaps have already heard what it contains. We regard the agreement signed last night and the Anglo-German naval agreement as symbolic of the desire of our two peoples never to go to war with one another again.
Czechoslovakia may have hated Chamberlain for agreeing to its dismemberment, but he had avoided war, and at home he was a hero.
There was the most enormous crowd. I got separated from Chamberlain by about 4 steps. I was about 5 steps behind, I suppose. And as he went up the stairs, I heard a voice say to him, a man, say to him, I couldn't see who it was, "Oh, Neville, go up to the window and repeat the famous historic phrase, peace with honor." And Chamberlain turned to whoever it was very snappily, and he said, "No, I don't do that kind of thing."
But charged with emotion, Chamberlain did that kind of thing. Told the crowd that there had come back from Germany peace with honor. Peace for our time, he said. Words that have lived in infamy.
And of course he knew it was a fatal mistake from the moment he'd said it. He felt he'd done his best, and was therefore gratified at the reception. And for that 1 second at the window, allowed it to affect his judgment. It was very, very unlucky for him.
One day later, Germany swallowed the Sudetenland as agreed. Soon it would be all of Czechoslovakia. Halloween was 1 month away. And in Europe, the hobgoblins were real.
Meanwhile, the next batch of war bulletins to threaten this country come not from Munich, but from Mars. Come back to the night before Halloween, 1938. A perfect night for a war of the worlds.
Our World continues in a moment.
Marty, why hasn't this package been picked up?
You call him. I already called him 10 times.
Hold it! If you'd called Federal Express, you wouldn't be having this problem. Come with me. Only Federal trucks have onboard computers.
Ah.
So our couriers know the instant you have a package for pickup.
Aha!
So we can pick it up on time.
Aha!
Next time, call Federal Express. Why fool around with anyone else?
I will call Federal, and then I'll get you off my back and everybody else off my back.
You know it's so warm. I'd like a little more, so won't you please make it warm? Make it warm.
There's a lot of warm in instant Quaker oatmeal.
Every day at 7 a.m., over 6 million people wake up ready to battle plaque, armed with Listerine. Listerine reduces plaque by up to 50% over brushing alone. For better oral hygiene, fight the battle against plaque and bad breath with Listerine.
All of these cough syrups treat a cough with exactly the same ingredient. Only Benylin has the powerful cough suppressant diphenhydramine, recommended by doctors for over 30 years. Benylin, our strength is your relief.
Welcome back to the night before Halloween, 1938, a night many of us thought was our last on Earth. In 1898, H.G. Wells wrote a book called War of the Worlds. Spaceships landed in the English countryside. Creatures from Mars got out and started incinerating people with heat rays. It was all pretty silly. But in 1938, when it looked as if creatures called Nazis would soon be incinerating Europe, and when so much was going on in this crazy mixed-up world that we didn't understand, it didn't seem quite so silly, especially on Halloween.
H.G. Wells was popular, but it wasn't until Orson Welles turned his imagination loose on H.G. that it made headlines in every paper in the country. What did he do? Well, according to the New York Tribune of November 2nd, 1938, what Orson Welles did on October 30th was to prove that a few effective voices, accompanied by sound effects, can so convince masses of people of a totally unreasonable, completely fantastic proposition as to create a nationwide panic. I can say it quicker. What Orson Welles did was to prove once more that it's not the story, but the storytelling. It wasn't what was told, it was how it was told and where. It was told on radio. Welles at the time was 23 years old. He made the cover of Time magazine for playing an octogenarian in Shaw's Heartbreak House. Just your average actor. Just your average genius.
The radio was believed in America. That was a voice from heaven, you see. And I wanted to destroy that as dramatically as possible. And that was the purpose of this sort of huge practical joke, which was much bigger than we expected to be.
Radio broadcasting and its temple, New York City, were as frenzied then as they are now. Just a week before the Martian hoax, the Mercury Players had no script for Halloween. Wells' assistant, Richard Barr, was 21 and worked for nothing. He delivered the first version of the script.
He threw it back at us. He said it was the worst show we had ever done, and he was furious with Houseman and Howard Koch, who had written it.
Orson said, I want it done in first person singular. I want it done with news bulletin in the first part, and contemporary. It was the process in the works right up to the last minute.
Wells thrived on chaos. The others survived it. John Houseman was his co-producer and fellow hoaxmaster.
That was very largely Orson's method of production, which was that you created a state of total despair and confusion, and then at the very last moment, out of this came a perfect show.
And now, Orson Welles stars in the Mercury Theater on the Air production of The War of the Worlds by H.G. Wells.
After the introductions, listeners heard, not actors, but dance music.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. From the Meridian Room in the Park Plaza Hotel in New York City, we bring you the music of Raymond Raquello and his orchestra. With a touch of the Spanish, Raymond Raquello leads off with La Comparsita.
Listening in Chicago was a teenager looking for some background music to accompany homework, Steve Allen.
I just flipped around the dial at random and selected some dance music. All I heard of it first was the dance music, which was quickly interrupted by what appeared to be an authentic news bulletin.
We interrupt our program of dance music to bring you a special bulletin from the Intercontinental Radio News. The Mount Jennings Observatory, Chicago, Illinois, reports observing several explosions of incandescent gas occurring at regular intervals on the planet Mars.
Listening in Newark, New Jersey, was 11-year-old Gloria Widelock and her family.
Shortly after that, there was an interruption again. And the interruption was that there was something happening in Grover's Mill, New Jersey.
It is reported that at 8:50 p.m., a huge flaming object, believed to be a meteorite, fell on a farm in the neighborhood of Grover's Mill, New Jersey, 22 miles from Trenton. The flash in the sky was visible within a radius of several hundred miles.
That month were used to bulletins from Prague, Berlin, London. But suddenly a small farm town in New Jersey took on the same national spotlight.
I turned up the volume, and that attracted my aunt and mother's attention. They said, "What is that?" I said, "Apparently there are spaceships coming towards planet Earth." And they said, "Really?" And I said, "Says that on the news here."
In Grover's Mill and other places, many people missed the announcement that it was only a play. They joined the broadcast in the middle after listening to something else. That happened to the family of Richard Stives.
We were all listening to Charlie McCarthy, and then we got a little bored, I guess. That's what it was. And somebody pushed the button, and that's when we hit the right button. I don't know what the radio station was then, and we heard Grover's Mill. Somebody said, "Leave it there. Leave it there. Let's see what it's all about."
Something's happening. Ladies and gentlemen, this is terrific.
He was describing, here, these things are coming out of this machine. You could hear the people, telling the crowd to get back and everything, And it's, like I say, it was so frightening. I said, well, how can this happen?
Lord, they're turning the plane. He's caught by the wood. The gas tanks, the automobiles, spreading everywhere. Coming this way now, about 20 yards to my right.
It seems to be a huge ball of fire, and it's picking up speed, and ahead of it there seems to be heat, an intense heat. Things are burning in its path, and then we didn't hear the announcer's voice at all.
The dying announcer was one trick being played back at the CBS studios. Putting on an actor that sounded like FDR was another.
Citizens of the nation, I shall not try to conceal the gravity of the situation that confronts the country.
And while we didn't say, "This is the President of the United States talking to you," the voice was sufficiently resemblant that the inference was obvious. That was the only, I thought, sort of naughty thing we did that night. Everything else was just good radio.
Here is a bulletin from Basking Ridge, New Jersey. Coon hunters have stumbled on a second cylinder similar to the first, embedded in the great swamp 20 miles south of Morristown.
Once they started moving north, heading for Morristown, heading for the Great Swamp, we knew then that the Pulaski Skyway was not far, and Newark was next.
Newark, New Jersey. Newark, New Jersey. Warning. Poisonous black smoke pouring in from Jersey marshes. Reaches South Street. Gas masks useless. Urge population to move into open spaces. Automobiles use Route 7.
There was mass hysteria, not only in my apartment, but in the whole building. We were going to die, and that was absolutely what we all thought.
Grandpa, like I said, got up, put chairs under the doors. We pulled the shades down. And we all sat around the radio.
Quietly, my father got away from the table, and he was wetting towels, and he started to put the towels around the window because the gases would be coming first.
I've never been that scared in my whole life.
And my mother was crying. The neighbors came in to kiss us goodbye and to hug us. My mother tried to make a phone call to her father and her sisters in New York, but she could never get through. The lines were very busy. She just wanted to say goodbye.
A bulletin is handed me. Martian cylinders are falling all over the country. One in Chicago,
they said on the show something about there have been sightings over Chicago, and at that, we were all over the cage like three canary birds. You know, I was basically cool physically, but my aunt and mother ran up the walls, across the ceiling, out the window, flew around over Clark Street, and came back in the hotel. And they were basically flipped out and panicked. It was not funny at the time. It's only funny now, if indeed now. We had to get out, they thought. I said, where? And they said, we'll go over to Holy Name Cathedral. They thought it would be better to get killed there.
People are holding service here below us in the cathedral. This may be the last broadcast. This is the end now. Smoke comes out, black smoke drifting over the city. It's reached Times Square. People are trying to run away from it, but it's no use.
Then we burst into the lobby, which to our great surprise was absolutely calm. People were eating, smoking cigars, dozing in the chairs by the potted palms. And something immediately told me that that was inconsistent with the end of the world. There should be a little more excitement when the end of the world comes along, for God's sake. You know, a few car crashes in the street or something. And then at that moment, I noticed that in the radio that was playing in the lobby area, there was another program on. And what little I knew about life, I knew that if there was a big event such as the final days or whatever, it really would not be one network's exclusive.
By the time of the commercial break, many people weren't listening. They were jamming the roads or the phone lines. The New Jersey State Police were swamped with phone calls that night. Callers hadn't heard the mid-break announcement or Wells sign-off.
This is Orson Welles, ladies and gentlemen. Out of character, to assure you that the War of the Worlds has no further significance than as the holiday offering it was intended to be. And if your doorbell rings and nobody's there, that was no Martian. It's Halloween.
And it was then, with hell breaking loose all over the country, that Orson went into his rather dubious little joke about, this is our Halloween contribution to the nation, and which was taken in bad part by a good many people at that point.
The folks here in Grover's Mill, New Jersey, certainly took it in bad part that their town had been chosen at random as the landing site for the mythical invaders. Writer Howard Koch had dropped his pencil on a map. There are no plaques here, no monuments to an event that never happened. It's said that some people, in panic, fired shotguns at that old water tower there, mistaking it for a Martian. Maybe so. Anyway, the fear soon turned to anger. No sooner was the broadcast over than the phones began to ring in New York. And the first caller, from Michigan, threatened to kill Orson Welles. The fear was on the other foot.
Well, we knew we were beginning to be in trouble then, because then the next call was a threat to bomb the CBS building on Madison Avenue. So we also knew that the CBS brass would be coming over to talk to us about what we seemed to have done. So we all hid in the ladies' room.
Then came the reporters, their notebooks filled with rumors.
They behaved simply horribly because they were trying to find out. So they would say things like, well, you've heard about the 8 people who were killed on the highway in New Jersey. Have you heard any other deaths? And another guy would say, well, you've heard about the casualties in Ohio. Have you heard of any more? So for about an hour there, we were profoundly convinced that we were mass murderers.
You must realize that
nobody had been killed, of course, but it was a chastened Orson Welles who met the press.
In 2 days, and I've had almost no sleep.
Came rather as a great surprise to us that a story about a mythical invasion by monsters from the planet Mars should have had so profound an effect upon radio listeners.
There was a danger that we were in real trouble legally, and that would mean CBS was in trouble.
You were aware of terror at the time you were giving this role? Were you aware that terror was going on throughout the nation?
Oh, no, of course not.
We were pretty sure we were going to lose the show. I don't know whether we thought we were going to jail. I don't think we had much time. You know, you don't think of these things when in the middle of the crisis, when it's going on.
Do you think there ought to be a law against such enactments as we had last night as a result of that?
I don't know what the legislation would be. I know that almost everybody in radio would do almost anything to avert the kind of thing that has happened, myself included, but I don't know what the legislation would be. We simply radio is new and we are learning about the effect it has on people. Learned a terrible lesson.
But I was a pariah for 2 or 3 days. Everybody thought my life and career was over.
The weed of crime bears bitter fruit. Crime does not pay. The shadow knows.
The shadow might have scared a few kids. On Halloween Eve, Orson Welles and radio spooked a nation.
Come back to the final chapter of The Night Before Halloween. Come back to the legacy of autumn 1938.
Our World continues in a moment.
Introducing Metaprin, when your body hasn't got time for the pain.
I haven't got time for the pain. I haven't got room for the pain. No, I haven't got time for the pain anymore.
Metaprin has ibuprofen, once only in prescription strength. It relieves body pain, even minor arthritis pain fast, and it's safer to your stomach than aspirin.
I haven't got time for the pain.
When your body hasn't got time for the pain, new Metaprin from the makers of Tylenol products.
Steel wool made its mark. Scratch marks. Scrubbers didn't, but didn't always clean either. Announcing Scrunge, the scrubber sponge that cleans without scratching. Harder than tough soil. Softer than scratchable surfaces. So don't scratch it, scrunge it.
Arm & Hammer did it. Put the power of baking soda in Arm & Hammer deodorizer spray.
It freshens in a way ordinary sprays can't. Doesn't just cover up. Destroys odors.
What a fresh, clean scent.
Arm & Hammer deodorizer spray.
Tonight, want somebody murdered? This ad in a well-known magazine made it as easy as ordering a pizza. The bloody and bizarre story.
Watch 2020.
Tonight.
It should be clear to the most casual observer that in this world no good deed goes unpunished. What also is clear is that sometimes the reverse is true. Consider the War of the Worlds broadcast of 1938. Yes, lawsuits were filed. No, not one was settled. Yes, CBS apologized. No, the Mercury players did not go to jail. In fact, the series was renewed. It got a sponsor, Campbell's Soup. The Mercury players' salaries went up. They got famous, fast. The rest goes something like this.
We were opposite Charlie McCarthy. Not the senator, but the wooden doll. That was the other network. And Roosevelt sent a telegram the next day saying this only goes to prove that all intelligent people are listening to Charlie McCarthy. He said that.
No dummy Orson Welles. Armed with their new fame, the Mercury players took Hollywood by storm. Howard Koch became a screenwriter for, among other things, Casablanca. Welles' houseman and bar went to RKO, where Welles got unprecedented creative control. His first product was unprecedentedly creative. According to Cinema Highbrows, Citizen Kane ranks as one of the best films ever made. Even plain old movie fans remember the first line.
We've learned a lot since the hurricane of 1938. The Weather Service called that one number 4. Now we named them. We started with just women's names. In 1979, we let the men in. We may not be able to stop the damage, but at least we know now that they're coming. The primitive barometers of 1938 have given way to weather satellites, which can track storms from birth.
This at the International Conference Center here in Geneva.
Satellites bring us news footage, too. No more scratchy radio reports, clear instant pictures from anywhere. And at any meeting between the powers, we remember Munich. It still haunts like a restless ghost from a Halloween past. Leaders afraid any concessions will bring accusations of another Munich.
I couldn't help but think that giving up SDI would have been like Chamberlain giving up radar as well as Czechoslovakia at Munich. A tragic blunder that might have spelled the end to freedom in Europe.
Well, there it is, the way it was, leading up to Halloween 1938. A study by Princeton University shortly after the Welles broadcast found that conservatively about 6 million people heard the program, or parts of it, and at least 1 million believed it and were scared, largely because they were accustomed to hearing programs interrupted for disturbing news bulletins from Europe. Wells had found the right vehicle, radio, for his spoof. Of course, most of us did not panic. Our critical faculties, the study said, were too sophisticated for that. Who could believe that Martians were invading? Why, next they'll be telling us that 6 million people were slaughtered because they were Jews, or that a city has been incinerated by one bomb, or that man has walked on the moon. What won't they think of next?
Then again, perhaps we've missed the real significance of the War of the Worlds broadcast. Perhaps its lasting place in history will be as the first recorded instance of zapping. Zapping. That's when you switch channels in order to avoid the commercial. Sponsors hate zapping. You might say zapping caused the Martian scare. Remember, it was only when Edgar Bergen and Charlie McCarthy finished and the commercial began that so many people switched from NBC to CBS and Orson Welles. Now, how could people smart enough to figure out zapping be dumb enough to fall for the Martian hoax? Sure, part of it was that the whole world was being scared and all, but there's another explanation. All you really need to know is that the most popular program in the nation starred a ventriloquist on the radio. And so it goes. Also in the autumn of 1938,
the first Jefferson nickel went into circulation, replacing the old Indian head buffalo nickel.
the first nylon toothbrush was introduced.
In Switzerland, the Nestle company introduced Nescafé.
On October 22nd, in Astoria, Queens, Chester Carlson produced the first Xerox image.
Some of the hit songs were Flatfoot Floogie, Falling in Love with Love, I'll Be Seeing You, and You Must Have Been a Beautiful Baby.
On September 23rd, records and other cultural artifacts were buried in a time capsule on the New York Fairgrounds, to be opened in 5,000 years.
Eddie Rickenbacker's fame and Lawrence Rockefeller's money created Eastern Airlines.
In Norwalk, Ohio, Ray Gandolf entered Miss Kratzer's third grade class at the Benedict Avenue School. For a transcript of this broadcast, send $3 to Our World Transcripts, 2 John Street, New York, New York, 10038.
In fact, we weren't as innocent as we meant to be when we did the Martian broadcast.
It was perhaps the most memorable radio program of all time. It was the work of a genius, but it created a panic beyond his wildest imagination. Our inside story for Thursday, October 20th, 1988.
Hi, everybody. I'm John Tesh.
And I'm Mary Hart. It was Halloween Eve, and across America, families tuned into a radio program to be entertained and wound up believing the nation had been invaded by spacemen from Mars. Our inside story for today. This time of year in Grover's Mill, you see a lot of corn, and the watermelons are ripe and ready for harvesting. Now, not much out of the ordinary happens in this small farming community in central New Jersey. Except on the night of October 30th, 1938, an army of Martians landed near this very pond, and hundreds of thousands of listeners heard about it firsthand on radio.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's indescribable. I can hardly force myself to keep looking at it. It's so awful. Its eyes are black and they gleam like a serpent. The mouth is a kind of V-shape with saliva dripping from its rimless lips. It seemed to quiver and pulsate, and the monster, or whatever it is, can hardly move.
It was, of course, Orson Welles' radio recreation of H.G. Wells' classic sci-fi story, War of the Worlds. And for the citizens of Grover's Mill, it was a night to remember. Hank Sears grabbed his shotgun and broke the news to a bar full of farmers.
You can imagine how Paul Revere said, right? Well, I don't think I should compare myself to Paul Revere, but I felt like that I was alerting somebody to an invasion, which is what I thought it was.
Grandpop got up and started putting chairs under the door
on the doorknobs and pulling the shades down. He was going to keep the Martians out that way.
Lolly Dye was 16 years old, and on that Sunday night, she was in church.
I couldn't be in a better place. If this world is coming to the end, the Martians are coming, going to destroy us, I'm in the Lord's house.
One tipsy farmer even shot at this water tower thinking it was a Martian.
Newark, New Jersey. Newark, New Jersey. Warning. Poisonous black smoke pouring in from Jersey marshes.
William DiGiacomo was a young 30-year-old doctor who had just finished his rounds that night at St. Michael's Hospital in Newark.
Well, there were about 50, 60, maybe 20 people outside, all trying to rush into the hospital all at one time. And utter confusion.
The confusion spread from coast to coast. The next day, newspapers had a field day reporting that some 1 million Americans had actually believed the Martian invasion. Orson Welles was in hot water, but he insisted that he never meant to scare America half to death.
I'm extremely surprised to learn that a story which has become familiar to children should have had such an immediate and profound effect upon radio listeners.
Psychology professor Joel Cooper of Princeton teaches students the lessons of War of the Worlds. He believes listeners in 1938 were ready to be scared.
People were feeling a sense of foreboding, a sense of anxiety, a sense of dread. The war in Europe was getting worse, it was broadening. The economy was bad.
Today, the people of Grover's Mill are getting ready to celebrate the 50th anniversary of the night the Martians came. They're selling souvenir hats, posters, coffee cups, even T-shirts. Next weekend, there'll be a big party.
We are inviting everyone who wishes to come, and Martians are especially invited. However, we have established special parking restrictions on spaceships.
There's also a War of the Worlds commemorative song produced by local musician Tom Marolda. And what will folks do the next time the Martians land?
I would run like hell, but not for my shotgun. I'd run for my camera. I want to meet somebody from a different planet.
Guess attitudes have changed. The fear and near panic created by War of the Worlds happened in spite of announcements before, during, and after the broadcast that the attack from outer space was fantasy and not fact. Later, the CBS network apologized to its listeners and to the Federal Communications Commission and said it would no longer use simulated news broadcasts as part of dramatic programs.
The fear subsided in the days following that radio drama, but War of the Worlds never really left America's consciousness. It's been with us ever since, and now there are modern revivals in several forms.
In 1988, War of the Worlds is proving to be just as popular as ever.
We all saw some fairly extraordinary phenomenon, Colonel. I don't believe in ghosts, and I sure as hell don't believe in aliens from another planet.
The 90-year-old H.G. Wells novel and 50-year-old Orson Welles radio broadcast, not to mention the 35-year-old Hollywood movie, have spun off a brand new syndicated TV series.
It's kind of the major story of the 20th century. I mean, after we get our problems with nuclear warfare and feeding people and prejudice and hatred out of the way and all those things which are kind of holding us down as a species, we're going to pack our bags and go into space. And this is the story about that.
A novelization of the 2-hour premiere episode is also available to hardcore fans.
How does this compare to Star Wars? Hey, it's all too evident these creatures have scientific knowledge far in advance of our own.
Jason Robards heads the cast of this recreation of the infamous broadcast produced for public radio. Rather than standing around a microphone, the cast was asked to act out their parts, and scenes that took place outside were taped outdoors to increase the realism and dramatic effect of the production. It will air, naturally, on Halloween Eve.
I have nothing more to say at this point.
Even the English have joined the War of the Worlds celebration. The BBC has produced a documentary, Invasion from Mars, that will debut Halloween nights on cable's Discovery Channel.
In fact, we weren't as innocent as we meant to be when we did the Martian broadcast. People, do suspect what they read in the newspapers and what people tell them, but when the radio came, and I suppose now television, anything that came through that new machine was believed.
Into people.
Ladies and gentlemen, I've just been handed a message that came in from Grover's Mill by telephone. Just one moment, please.
Of the creatures in the rocket cylinder at Grover's Mill, I can give you no authoritative information, either as to their nature, their origin, or their purposes here on Earth.
The voice of Orson Welles terrifying radio listeners 50 years ago. Welcome back to CBS This Morning. I'm Harry Smith.
And I'm Faith Daniels. Kathleen Sullivan is off this morning.
The War of the Worlds was a radio drama performed by Orson Welles' Mercury Theater. Just a radio drama, but it scared the daylight out of America. We will look back at fictitious but frightening invasion from Mars, talk to Howard Koch and the man who wrote it. Howard Koch is the man who wrote it. We'll sample a 50th anniversary production of the drama starring Jason Robart, Steve Allen, and Douglas Edwards. And we'll visit Grover's Mill, New Jersey, the real town where the Martian invaders were supposed to have landed.
I guess equally appropriate for a Halloween weekend, we will be at home with Anthony Perkins this morning, who played more... 50 years ago this Sunday night, Martians invaded Earth. It wasn't real, only a drama on CBS Radio. But to many of the 6 million people listening, it sounded very real and frightening. They heard a ballroom music program interrupted by a news bulletin of a Martian landing in New Jersey. Many didn't hear the disclaimers that it was just some Halloween fun.
It was the night before Halloween, 1938, 8 p.m. 23-year-old Orson Welles and his Mercury Theater presented a radio play based on H.G. Wells' novel, The War of the Worlds. John Houseman was the co-producer.
Within 10 minutes, I realized that the switchboards were deluged with complaints, calls, and that hell had broken loose.
Historians believe more than 1 million people took the broadcast literally.
We thought the world was coming to an end because of the Martians.
People were running and screaming and knocking on doors.
They were all excited, and one was saying to another, "Is this the end of the world?"
At a news conference the next day, Orson Welles defended the hoax.
I'm extremely surprised to learn that a story which has become familiar to children should have had such an immediate and profound effect upon radio listeners.
Suddenly, you realize that the spoken word through radio was able to affect the feeling, the emotions of the entire world.
The man who wrote the radio play, The War of the Worlds, was Howard Koch, a young writer who would go on to, from radio to Hollywood, where his credits would include co-authorship of the film classic Casablanca. Howard Koch is with us this morning. Good morning. I see you are holding there in front of you an original script of the historic radio broadcast. It's been on display at Sotheby's here in New York. They're going to be auctioning it in December. It is fragile. It has some notes scribbled on it. Those are your notes. There are some Orson Welles handwriting in the inside as well. I thought they confiscated all of those.
All but this. This was in my apartment. I didn't go down to the studio during the broadcast. Mm-hmm. And they came in, the police came in and took all the scripts they could get their hands on in the studio. But, of course, they didn't know that I had this one up on 72nd Street. And it's become now, I guess, the only one that I know of.
Amazing. They came to you and they said, H.G. Wells has this incredible story. Write it into a radio play. How many, you had what, 6 days?
Yes, and the way Orson wanted it, I could use very little from the H.G. Wells story except the idea of the invasion and description of the Martian machines and their heat wave.
Right.
But the rest of it, he wanted in news bulletin form and then first person singular and contemporary. And I said, but Orson, this is impossible to do in 6 days. That's original script. And Orson never brooked that kind of defiance. Mm-hmm. And he said, do it. That's all. So I went back and started on it. And I realized I needed a map, because I had to lay out a campaign between us and the Martians the way Orson wanted.
Sure.
And I had been up to the country, see my father, Kingston, New York, and coming down I went through a portion of New Jersey.
Mm-hmm.
And so I stopped at a gas station, and they gave me New Jersey map. So when I came back to my apartment, I spread out the map on the table, closed my eyes, put the pencil down.
And that's where the Martians landed.
That was Grover's Mill. Yeah.
Now, you worked tirelessly on the script for 6 days.
Yes.
Is it true you had no idea when you woke up the next day that after the radio broadcast that all this furor had been created by what you had written?
Not in the least. They had tried to reach me during the night, but I was so tired I didn't wake up. And the way I found out was I was going down. I had 1/2 morning off for the next assignment, and that was a chance to get a haircut. So I walked down 72nd Street, and I heard passers-by saying words like war, invasion, so on. And I rushed into the barber shop, and I said, "What's going on? Hitler made a move? We're in war or something?" And he laughed and held up the morning paper.
And there it was.
And there it was, Martian invasions, play, Panic's Nation, or words to that effect.
Yeah.
Well, very odd moment in my life.
Howard, thanks very much for coming and joining us this morning.
Oh, thank you.
Appreciate it. To remember that 1938 War of the Worlds and 1988 war will be broadcast, and Faith has that story.
Harry, for the 50th anniversary, an independent company, Other World Media, came up with the idea to redo War of the Worlds. And they have done just that with Jason Robards during the Orson Welles role and Steve Allen, and even longtime CBS anchorman Doug Edwards in the cast. It'll be broadcast on public radio this Sunday.
Those strange beings who landed in the Jersey farmlands tonight are the vanguard of an invading army from the planet Mars.
Should we bomb them back to the Stone Age?
Pearson, could you just... It is all too evident that these creatures have scientific knowledge far in advance of our own.
This is the end now. The latest report, 120 known survivors. This will upset the country again.
A nationwide panic is not what this production is after. The new version of the War of the Worlds simply hopes to revive radio drama.
Radio is still a very important thing. You have to let the words carry you. The right words are the most important thing.
Dr. Pearson, what was their weapon like?
A heat ray. My guess that in some way they're able to generate an intense heat in a chamber of absolute non-conductivity.
But if this looks like a movie set, it's because it's being recorded at George Lucas's Skywalker Ranch in an attempt at the ultimate radio realism.
Please.
We're moving this medium into the 20th century. We are taking it on the road. We are recording on location. I mean, that's something that I don't think anyone has really ever done before with it. We're treating it like a cinematic event, cinema for the mind.
So the latest of high-tech recording systems is being used.
This thing is so cutting edge that even I don't know how it works.
Randy Tom, the sound designer of many films, including The Empire Strikes Back and The Right Stuff, is in charge of the recording, and David Osman is the director.
We don't have to record wind and fill it in later on. This machine appears, you don't see it, but it's always there. It's there down here, right? So what we're doing is just recording exactly the way television or film is recorded. It makes our production easier, and it makes it real.
How did you escape?
In the interest of making it all sound real, David Osman hooked up CBS News veteran Douglas Edwards in Tallahassee, Florida, with Steve Allen in New York via satellite.
Very bad news, Doug.
Steve Allen remembers listening to the broadcast in Chicago when he was just 17.
When we heard that they were sighted in the skies over our city, we thought we should get out. That was a pretty irrational response. Get out where? You know, if we could get out to Cleveland, it might have made some sense, but just to get out in the street made no sense. Nevertheless, that's where we were immediately headed.
Are people going to head that way this Sunday night? This crowd of unsuspecting picnickers was recruited to play the voices of frightened citizens. And they certainly let their imaginations run wild.
The monsters in your mind are far more terrifying than the ones that anyone can visualize for you.
So even today, it seems that a suspension of disbelief is possible. And perhaps that's still what radio can do best. Tomorrow in the small town of Grover's Mill, a commemorative monument will be unveiled by Howard Koch and by New Jersey Governor Thomas Kean. We have the very first sneak preview of the monument this morning. Joining us live from Grover's Mills is Douglas Forrester, chairman of the commemorative committee. Good morning, Doug.
Good morning.
I guess that's the monument we're seeing right there.
It certainly is.
What does it say?
We have a bronze monument which was sculpted by J. Warren, which is a fine example of what we're trying to portray here. We have the three main elements of the celebration. We have the spaceship, we have Orson Welles at the mic, and we have an American family listening to the radio. You know, one of the important things here that we're trying to point out is that this is not just a little local event. Grover's Mill is part of West Windsor, but it really has become part of the national consciousness because of the significance of what happened that night. It really was a national event.
But the people in Grover's Mill were somehow seen to have panicked more than the rest of the country. You don't see it that way, do you?
Well, there were very few people here in Grover's Mill back in 1938. Most of the reports of the panic were reports from the West Coast, Manhattan, and northern New Jersey. There are certainly amusing anecdotes that come from this part of the country as well. But this town responded the same way everybody else did, which is one of the main reasons that we wanted to commemorate the golden anniversary. We're having a good time. We're commemorating the only place the Martians have landed. That's worth a good party.
You're also going to put a time capsule in, I understand, that will be dug up again on the 100th anniversary. What's going to be in it?
Yes, we are. You can see the time capsule to my left. The time capsule will contain mementos from those in our Grover's Mill circle who have helped us with the celebration, as well as some school children and some public remembrances. That'll be unearthed on the 100th anniversary. In order that we can continue to remember what is a very unique piece of Americana.
Douglas Forrester, thanks so much for joining us. Have a great weekend out there. Howard Koch,
thank you very much.
As well. It's 22 past the hour. Coming up Friday at Home with Anthony Perkins.
Years ago, skepticism turned to fear, downright panic. They ran into the street, some of them were out in a barn. The show was called The War of the Worlds. And now the invasion site, Grover's Mill, New Jersey, is celebrating a half-century of notoriety. Correspondent Maury Alter reports now live at Mercer County Park with the second of his three-part report on the anniversary of the Martians.
Hi, folks. You're probably saying to me, hey, Maude, look behind me. It's either a giant witch watch or a flying saucer. Well, it's not either. It's a monument to the flying saucer, you know, the one that landed around here about 50 years ago and caused all of that trouble. We're at Mercer County Park, where the real flying saucer, just kidding, is supposed to land in about 3 hours. Speaking of kidding, there are some kids at a particular elementary school that really got into these things. The Maurice Hawk Elementary School. The kids wrote a semi-original song about it.
It's a world of laughter, a world of kids. It's a world of hopes and a world of fears. There's so much that we share that it's time we're away in the small world after all.
50 years ago, Martians didn't really land on Earth, did they?
No.
But how do you know?
Because there's no such thing. And the small universe will be born, and the Martians will be our friends.
Do you guys know what Martians look like?
No.
Not any idea. You don't think they look like your teacher either?
Maybe.
Yeah, maybe, but you're not sure. You know, we're in luck, though. The kids at Dutch Neck Elementary know what they look like. So, basically, this is what Martians look like, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, did the antenna start to grow in third grade or a little earlier?
No, earlier.
A little earlier than that, huh?
It is October 31st, 1988 in Grover's Mill, New Jersey. We are here waiting for the return of our Martian friends.
Yes, the crack WDNS news team was preparing to greet the Martians and tell them what's changed since the Mercury Theater days 50 years ago.
Our satellite report indicates that your planet at this time is best prepared for a visit from intelligent life forms.
Obviously, everything has changed around Grover's Mill Pond. Everything from A
is for appliance.
If the Martians come again, they would want to live in the apartments in West Windsor or Plainsboro.
To G and even Z.
Well, that's the way it was, that's the way it is, and we'll wait to see what's to come in the years ahead.
I told that kid to send a tape and resume to the boss. I think he's ready. Anyway, ready or not, the Martians land here. Just kidding. A little later. We, of course, have a video camera this time around, so we'll know for sure.
Widely accepted as the most influential force of the 20th century. As our man in Hollywood, Jim Brown, reminds us, that power was evident a long time ago.
Everybody, listen carefully. The Martians are coming this way. We must evacuate the city.
I wonder how British author H.G. Wells would have reacted if he could have seen all that has resulted from his classic tale, War of the Worlds, the story of the Martian invasion of the planet Earth. These are scenes from the 1953 movie version, which by then found Martians invading not England, but Los Angeles. We'll come back to take a closer look at the movie in a moment. But let's look first at another version of the Wells tale, the one that really immortalized the story. It is Halloween night, 1938, 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Americans that Sunday night gathered around their radios to listen to their favorite program. On CBS, the Mercury Theater of the Air is about to present its version of War of the Worlds, adapted by Howard Koch and presided over by another Wells, Orson. This time, the Martian invaders are picking on the hapless residents of Grover's Mill, New Jersey. The broadcast, in its realistic news format, causes millions of listeners to believe it is really happening.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's indescribable. I can hardly force myself to keep looking at it. It's so awful. The eyes are black and they gleam like a serpent. The mouth is kind of V-shaped with saliva dripping from its rimless lips that seem to quiver and pulsate, and the monster or whatever it is can hardly move.
The thing's raising up. The crowd falls back. They've seen enough.
This is a recreation of that historic CBS broadcast for a 1975 television movie titled The Night That Panicked America. In the days following the real broadcast, there was a lot of expert analysis of what happened and why. One newspaper shuddered to think what might have happened if most people had not been listening to Edgar Bergen and Charlie McCarthy on the radio.
Of course, we are deeply shocked and deeply regretful about the results of last night's broadcast.
And on the day after the broadcast, a remorseful 23-year-old Orson Welles met newsmen.
It came rather as a great surprise to us that a story about a mythical invasion by monsters from the planet Mars should have had so profound an effect upon radio listeners.
There are pictures of me made that about 3 hours afterwards, looking as much as I could like an early Christian saint. I didn't know what I was doing. But I'm afraid that I'm not as hypocritical as anybody could possibly get. We expected a lunatic fringe, but we didn't know it would go all the way across the country, you know. I had friends who, ran out. One of my favorites was Jack Barrymore, who had a kennel of Great Dane dogs. When he heard it, he went out and undid all the kennels and said, "Fend for yourselves."
15 years later, when producer George Powell put H.G. Wells' tale to film, he decided Los Angeles was the ideal target. The special effects of Gordon Jennings received an Oscar. And in the end, the Martians all succumbed to the bacteria in the atmosphere for which their systems were unprepared. Or did they? Flash ahead to this year of 1988. They're here again. The new syndicated television series War of the Worlds begins appropriately with an episode titled The Resurrection. And we learn that those rascals were only hibernating in those storage drums in which they'd been placed.
Moto, this is Rosebud. Make that 6 bogeys. We have 3 machines heading from Morris.
In addition to the new TV series, there is an updated radio version to be broadcast this Sunday night on public radio stations with Jason Robards in the role originally played by Orson Welles. Meantime, the emergence of radio news in the 30s and how Welles capitalized on that in a world about to go to war will be explored next Monday night on the Discovery Channel's telecast Invasion from Mars. Hell, about the only thing left is War of the Worlds, the musical. Are you listening, Stephen Sondheim?
Those reports are part of an Orson Welles radio play, and as Doreen Gensel reports tonight, the residents of Grover's Mill are celebrating the 50-year anniversary of one of the greatest hoaxes in history.
Aliens from another planet landed in Grover's Mill, New Jersey tonight. These invaders don't seem hostile, but they're sure drawing a big crowd. Why Little Grover's Mill, New Jersey? Did your father ever explain that?
It's perfect if you look around at night here. Farmland, very uninhabited, very easy to land, very easy to pick up specimens.
It is beautiful.
Yes?
I'm thinking of staying.
What's happening here tonight is a recreation of the event 50 years ago that put Grover's Mill, New Jersey on the map. It was a radio broadcast so realistic that it frightened people all over the country. The War of the Worlds.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's indescribable. I can hardly force myself to keep looking at it. It's so awful. The eyes are black and they gleam like a serpent. The mouth is kind of V-shaped with saliva dripping from its rimless lips.
The radio voice of Orson Welles in 1938. He described Martians landing in Grover's Mill too dramatically for some. Scared people here so much they fired shots at a water tower, thinking it was a Martian spaceship. In the end, Orson Welles described it all as a Halloween hoax. But the joke wasn't funny here at first. People in Grover's Mill are just getting over the shock enough now to plan a 50-year festival. That's a big success so far. What'd you think?
Scary.
Come on.
No.
Were you scared?
Sort of. They were weird.
These Martians are weird. I met one young man who says he's ready to fight them. How are you going to handle this?
I'm going to send Daddy to the toilet.
Oh! And one Martian who's fighting off the men.
Typical rude male earthling.
Yeah. And this is just the beginning. These Martians are going to be here in Grover's Mill all weekend long, and who knows what could happen in that amount of time.
Wave of panic across America. Welles and his cast of players were so convincing, an estimated 1 million people believed Martians were invading the Earth. The center of the invasion, Grover's Mill, New Jersey.
We take you now to Grover's Mill, New Jersey.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's indescribable. I can hardly force myself to keep looking at it. It's so awful. The eyes are black and they gleam like a serpent. The mouth is kind of V-shaped with saliva dripping from its rimless lips.
Martian cylinders are falling all over the country. One outside of Buffalo, one in Chicago.
It sounded like the real thing, and even though Welles finally told his audience there were no Martians, it was too little too late. Welles and his fellow performers, including John Houseman, had taken the country for an unforgettable Halloween ride without asking.
Rich heritage that makes us who we are. On America, coast to coast.
This is Don Amici, rounding up the Chase and Sanborn gang and greeting you for all of them. Ladies and gentlemen, we interrupt our program of dance music to bring you a special bulletin from the Intercontinental Radio News. It is reported that at 8:50 p.m., a huge flaming object believed to be a meteorite fell on a farm in the neighborhood of Grover's Mill, New Jersey, 22 miles from Trenton. We take you now to Grover's Mill, New Jersey.
What I can see of the object itself doesn't look very much like a meteor. At least not the meteors I've seen. It looks more like a huge cylinder. Wait a minute, something's happening. Humped shape is rising out of the pit. There's a jet of flame springing from the mirror, and it leaps right at the advancing men. It strikes them head on. Lord, they're turning into flames. The whole field's caught up by the woods, the barns, the gas tanks of the automobiles spreading everywhere. It's coming this way now, about 20 yards to my right.
Ladies and gentlemen, due to circumstances beyond our control, we are unable to continue the broadcast from Grover's Mill.
gentlemen, I have a grave announcement to make. Incredible as it may seem, both the observations of science and the evidence of our eyes lead to the inescapable assumption that those strange beings who landed in the Jersey farmlands tonight are the vanguard of an invading army from the planet Mars.
Millions of Americans at home with their families heard that adaptation of H.G. Wells' War of the Worlds. Martians invading rural New Jersey at peak listening time on Sunday night, Halloween Eve. Orson Welles' innocence may or may not have been genuine. Still, why did his broadcast cause a panic? At the time, the reaction was blamed on public gullibility or mass hysteria. But a lot of what's being said about the panic is unsatisfactory. Maybe the American people had good reason to believe what they'd heard.
What they'd heard about the planet Mars was a confusing mixture of fact and fantasy. A key figure in generating the Martian myth was the astronomer Percival Lowell. At the turn of the century, Lowell studied Mars from his Arizona observatory. Photographs taken through his telescope confirmed to him that what he saw were straight lines and polar caps. His detailed sketches, interpreting these as ice caps and canals, excited scientists and lay people alike. According to his popular books, the Martian canals were a massive irrigation system constructed by superhuman creatures to channel water from the melting polar caps to their thirsty equatorial cities.
Your Martians first are tied to the utopian tradition that goes way back to the 16th century, and they are showed as a wiser civilization which can teach Earthmen how to promote a universal and peace-loving society on Earth. That's the utopian. Secondly, the romantic tradition, best exemplified a generation later by Edgar Rice Burroughs, suggested that an Earthman would go to Mars and fall in love with a lovely Martian princess, and they would live happily ever after. Now, the third idea of an invasion by Mars came about primarily in Wells' The War of the Worlds. He had them invade from a dying world to conquer the Earth, and his major point in the novel was to suggest that inevitable progress with mankind as the supreme being was not necessarily the end all of creation and evolution.
Wells, unlike Lowell, portrayed hostile Martians by projecting contemporary imperial struggles on a cosmic scale. His writings warned that advanced technology in the hands of a superior alien intelligence could lead to the destruction of civilization. Beginning in 1927 in Amazing Stories, Wells and Lowell had their fears and fantasies presented scientifically. Editorials boasted that today's extravagant fiction was tomorrow's cold fact. Out of the pages of Amazing Stories, Buck Rogers came battling to the defense of America. Buck's exploits against interplanetary invaders entertained millions in the first nationally syndicated sci-fi comic strip.
It wasn't long before the fantastic foes and forces of pulp science fiction were being portrayed on film. In the 1930s, the motion picture industry invested heavily in special effects. Nothing was spared in making the serial Flash Gordon, which came out in 1936. It was hugely popular, and in mid-1938, a 15-part sequel was released, Flash Gordon's Trip to Mars.
Flash Gordon's Trip to Mars had been out for barely 6 months at the time of the Orson Welles broadcast.
It's one of the
So by then, Americans had been bombarded with space operas, not only in magazines and newspapers, but in weekly serials playing opposite feature films.
Happy, you and Dale get back in there.
They had actually seen the conflict with Martians enacted in cinemas across the country, complete with death rays and spaceships. But that alone can't explain the panic caused by Wells' broadcast. People panicked who couldn't read and never saw a movie. The most potent influence was radio itself.
It is 3 months, my friends, since I have talked to the people of this country about our national problems. But during this period, many things have happened.
After his inauguration in 1933, President Franklin D. Roosevelt spoke regularly to American radio listeners in his famous fireside chats.
To establish and maintain a dollar which will not change its purchasing and debt-paying power during the succeeding generation.
His predecessors, Coolidge and Hoover, had scorned radio. But despite the Depression, radio ownership had boomed. Roosevelt appreciated the value of being heard in the homes of ordinary citizens.
Our dollar is now altogether too much influenced by the internal policies of other nations.
Other public figures also realized the power of radio propaganda. Louisiana Senator Huey Long was one, a populist demagogue crusading against Roosevelt. Another strident critic was Charles Coughlin, a Catholic priest who bought airtime to sell his National Socialist views. Radio's power of conveying drama and emotion was never more apparent than in May 1937, when the German airship Hindenburg arrived in New Jersey after a transatlantic flight.
Standing still now, the back motors of the ship are just holding it just enough to keep it from burst into flames. Wait, get it started. It's crashing terrible. And it's falling on the mooring fast and all the folks between us. This is terrible. This is one of the worst catastrophes in the world. Oh, it's a terrific crash, ladies and gentlemen. It's smoke and it's flames now. All the humanity and all the passengers screaming around it.
Many of those who didn't see this newsreel heard Herbert Morrison's live radio broadcast. It was tragically unforgettable.
And everybody killed. I'm sorry. I'm going to step inside where I cannot see it. I've lost my voice. This is the worst thing I've ever witnessed.
This was the way most Americans got the latest news. Meanwhile, in Europe, radio had a chance to prove itself as the German menace grew. Concerned Americans could tune in as events unfolded. Competing U.S. radio networks sent their correspondents to get eyewitness reports. In March 1938, Hitler's troops entered Austria. CBS were prepared. They had access to powerful shortwave transmitters, and one of their reporters was on the spot for the invasion.
This is Edward Murrow speaking from Vienna. It's now nearly 2:30 in the morning, and Herr Hitler has not yet arrived. No one seems to know just when he will get here, but most people expect him sometime after 10 o'clock tomorrow morning. It's of course obvious.
Murrow's eyewitness report transported American audiences thousands of miles in an instant. The world seemed smaller.
This sort of horrifying event was described by Edward R. Murrow, who was able to get to Vienna before the troops, and he described them, and he had arranged for this occasion the use of shortwave relays. So that's for the first time. They had a broadcast in which they called in correspondents. They said, we take you now to Berlin to get the reaction from there. We take you to Schreier in Berlin. We take you to so-and-so and so-and-so. We take you to so-and-so for a reaction from London. So you had this so-called World News Roundup, which was created on that occasion, 1938, by Edward R. Murrow.
Soon after the march into Austria, Hitler turned his attentions to the Sudetenland in Czechoslovakia. By September, tensions were at a peak. American listeners heard about this crisis from another CBS commentator.
This period was dominated by somebody called H.V. Kaltenborn, who who stayed on duty for 18 days, sleeping on a cot in the studio. People would wake him up and say, "There's another crisis, Hans," and he would get up and he'd look at the bulletin that had come in, and he would immediately be able to comment on it.
Hans Kaltenborn was an astute observer of world affairs and was fluent in German. His crisis reports began on September 12th. Hitler addressed the annual Nazi Party rally at Nuremberg. Kaltenborn translated phrase by phrase.
I demand the right of self-determination of the 3.5 million Sudeten Germans, to whom Mr. Benesch has no right to make a present.
Chamberlain and the French Prime Minister Daladier discussed with Hitler the future of the Sudetenland, with the Czechs as reluctant onlookers.
Daladier and Chamberlain are stepping into that conference this morning with an agreed plan which the Czech government has accepted. And you can depend upon it that either Adolf Hitler will accept that particular plan or the conference is not going to proceed smoothly. We take you now to Berlin, Germany.
4 days later, a truculent Hitler gave his most violent speech so far at the Sportpalast in Berlin.
Wird am 1. Oktober uns dieses Gebiet übergeben müssen.
I've now demanded that after 20 years, Mr. Benesch be obliged to come to the truth. He must give us this territory by October 1st.
Kaltenborn was providing the greatest show yet on Earth. On September 29th, at a third conference in Munich, the British and French signed a peace treaty with Hitler, averting war in Europe at the Czechs' expense. German newsreels gave the impression of a hero's welcome. CBS audiences heard differently in the by now conventional manner.
We interrupt this program in the Berkshire Music Festival to bring you a transatlantic two-way conversation between Prague, Czechoslovakia, and New York.
The people are protesting.
The people are protesting. And how is that protest manifesting itself?
There are demonstrations in the streets.
Demonstrations in the streets.
I can tell you just the slogans which the crowds are shouting.
Yes? Give them to me, will you?
Chamberlain has sold us out.
Chamberlain has sold us out, yes?
Shame on France.
Shame on France.
Ladies and gentlemen, we return you now to the Berkshire Music Festival.
I'm speaking from the roof of Broadcasting Building, New York City.
Just 4 weeks after American audiences had sat at home anxiously awaiting more news of invasions in Europe, came news of an invasion of the United States.
The enemy is now in sight above the Palisades. Five great machines.
Again, CBS had their man on the spot.
Now they're lifting their metal hands. This is the end now. Smoke comes out, black smoke drifting over the city.
Using gas attacks and other imagery of European war, Orson Welles' Mercury Theater production played on the endemic fears of ordinary Americans.
100 yards away. It's 50 feet.
About 10 or 15 minutes into the broadcast, and the phone started ringing, and I began to get hysterical calls saying, where are the invaders and what's happening? And I said, come on, this is just Orson Welles' Mercury Theater, because I had the program on the monitor. And I said, it's just a regular show. Take it easy. It's just a regular Mercury Theater. It's the War of the Worlds, and don't panic. There are no invaders.
As we were continuing with the script in front of us, we saw that in the control room there were a great many policemen, and every moment more. Now, later we found out that the police were as confused as we were because there wasn't any anything they could arrest us for, but there they were, looking fierce, and a lot of people talking to other people in dumb show, and a very tense atmosphere was generated in the studio. We thought, well, something's gone wrong. Some few people have complained and have swallowed what we're telling them about the Martians having come to the world. But we didn't know that it wasn't a few people. It was, in fact, nationwide.
The Haidt family from Brooklyn, New York, were listening to the broadcast that night. Two of the daughters still have vivid memories of the events that followed.
Yeah. And although I was only 12 at the time, I was distressed that they changed it to music. And then all of a sudden, wait, you gotta listen to this. And then they broke into the music with a news flash. And then my eyes started to pop out. And I got scared. And then I don't think we even made it half.
We had to stay tuned to it, you see, because it was all these vital information that came through on each news break there that we didn't want to miss anything that we should miss. You know, people said, why didn't you change the station? But we didn't know. My father said, leave it alone. We must listen to what we must do. You know, we had to have all
They were real cool.
And I did try
courageous.
to call the station up to see what it was all about, but I couldn't get through.
I fiddled with the dial, and I got some classical music that I enjoyed, so I turned it on loud as I wished, went into the bathroom, was washing my hair. And the program was interrupted, and I thought, well, what's going on? It irritated me. The second time it was interrupted, I thought, well, goodness, that's in New Jersey. Forget about it.
That evening, as the broadcast continued, Orson Welles exploited people's deference to the voices of authority.
At this time, we take you to Washington for a special broadcast on the national emergency. The Secretary of the Interior.
Citizens of the nation, I shall not try to conceal the gravity of the situation that confronts the country. Placing our faith in God, we must continue the performance of our duties, each and every one of us, so that we may confront this destructive adversary with a nation united, courageous, and consecrated to the preservation of human supremacy on this earth.
It wasn't until I heard President Roosevelt's voice that I got frightened. At that point, I was terrified because supposedly this person that sounded like Roosevelt was saying that it was a national thing and the whole nation was on an alert.
I went into my bedroom, but when I was waiting to hear how our mother was going to approach the young children, because I needed talking to, too. So Mother went into the bedroom, and she said to them, listen, children, get up. Why do we have to get up? She says, get up. She said, because we're going to die. And if we're going to die, we're going to die all together. Well, we got that one right, huh, sis?
I'm extremely surprised to learn that a story which has become familiar to children through the medium of comic strips and many succeeding novels and adventure stories should have had such an immediate and profound effect upon radio listeners.
You were aware of terror at the time you were giving this role? Were you aware that terror was going on throughout the nation?
Oh, no, of course not.
We did Dracula and...
At the following day's press conference, Orson Welles was all innocence. But 20 years later, he told a different story.
In fact, we weren't as innocent as we meant to be. When we did the Martian broadcast, we were fed up with the way in which everything that came over this new magic box, the radio, was being swallowed. People, do suspect what they read in the newspapers and what people tell them, but when the radio came, and I suppose now television, anything that came through that new machine was believed.
The panic did not prove the gullibility of ordinary Americans, or even the ability of a gifted producer to play an elaborate prank at their expense. The invasion from Mars in October 1938 was a stunning demonstration of the power of radio to manipulate a mass audience in a time of political crisis. 50 years later, it reminds us of our continuing vulnerability to broadcast voices that shape our world.
This is Orson Welles, ladies and gentlemen. Out of character, to assure you that the War of the Worlds has no further significance than as the holiday offering it was intended to be. Starting now, we couldn't soap all your windows and steal all your garden gates. By tomorrow night, so we did the best next thing. We annihilated the world before your very ears and utterly destroyed the CBS. So goodbye, everybody, and remember, please, for the next day or so, the terrible lesson you learned tonight. That grinning, glowing, globular invader of your living room is an inhabitant of the pumpkin patch, and if your doorbell rings and nobody's there, that was no Martian, it's Halloween.
Tonight, the Columbia Broadcasting System and its affiliated stations coast to coast has brought you The War of the World by H.G. Wells, the 17th in its weekly series of dramatic broadcasts featuring Orson Welles and the Mercury Theater on the air. Next week, we present a dramatization of 3 famous short stories. This is the Columbia Broadcasting System.